This is a video for how to go about setting up your grid and your snap settings in AutoCAD. You will notice as I've loaded AutoCAD, I just have a basic blank workspace, but you can notice that I do have a grid system set up, and I can zoom in and out on the grids, and you can see that there is a similar number or the same number of squares on the x-axis here as I would see in the y-axis for each square of grid. Now, in order for us to modify our settings for our grid and our snap, we're going to go down and we're going to right click on a grid and we're going to go to grid settings. And you'll see when we go into snap and grid settings, we can turn the snap on and off, and we can also turn our grids on and off this way. So our grid spacing right now is a 1/2 inch by a 1/2 inch. That means that every one of these squares out here snaps a 1/2 inch in the X direction and a 1/2 inch in the Y direction. We could change that to 1 by 1. So if I just go back here, notice that I have it set up to where basically we'll have equal spacing. And if I say OK, you're going to see that our grid changed. They got a little bit bigger. And we now have for ourselves every one of these would be a distance of 1. I can turn on and off the grid in AutoCAD by just clicking on this button. It can go and it can come at the same time. We're going to go over to the snap settings over here. We're going to right click and we're going to go to snap settings, and we'll see the exact same menu that we just saw. And for snap on, if we say, I want snap X spacing to be the same as my grid spacing, I can come into here and I can say 1 and I can just tab, and we have equal X and Y spacing. I'm going to go ahead and say OK. What you will notice is that as I have my cursor with no command selected, I can kind of wander and go as I please with my cursor. If I come up to my line command, I can click on the X and the Y, and as I drag over, you can see it snapping at a distance of 1 at every grid. So if I wanted to draw a line that's 5 wide by 5 tall, again, I can come up and I have 5. I can just snap to each one of these grids. If I don't want to stay with my snaps on, I can turn them off just by clicking on this button, and you'll see that I have kind of a free rotate now. There are massively different numbers to minute decimal places that I can select for distances of my lines. I can also turn off the grid itself by clicking here and have a more open workspace. I can even go back and turn on the snaps with the grid off and snap as I go. I can go back to the grid settings and change this to say, you know what, let's go just a 1/2 of a distance and say OK. And now if I turn my grid back on, go back up to my line command, you'll notice that it's going to snap just a little bit of a distance for each square. I now have half distances. Where I was only going 1 distance here to here, now I have half distances. So this takes 4 separate drags to get to the same point. I can change these as I go. This makes things very, very manageable in creating any drawing in AutoCAD. If you have snaps where the distances, or a drawing where your distances are, let's say, just a value of 1 or a 1/2 or a 1/4, having your grid on and using your snaps makes it very easy to manage a sketch or a drawing within AutoCAD. This has been a video for how to go about managing your grid and your snap settings for a sketch in AutoCAD.